Okay, good afternoon. Um, Last year, I began to share some insights into Megillas Esther from a couple of maybe a little bit off the beaten path commentaries. So let me just review who those commentaries are, and then we can get started sharing some insights. Today is Rosh Chodesh Adar Aleph. The new moon of the first month of Adar. And with a double Adar this week, we'll have 6 weeks to get some insights into the Megillah. The sources that I'm planning to use, first of all, the primary one is a work called Ateres Zahav, which literally means the golden crown. It's authored by someone who's known as Rabbi Chaim from Aram, Tzova, which is Syria. He was one of the primary students of Rabbi Chaim Vital, who was, of course, the primary student of the Arizal. And he published 2 distinct volumes on Megillas Esther. The first volume is purely pshat-based, although, frankly, it gets a bit into what we'd call drush as well. And the second volume is primarily Kabbalistically based. These are both very extensive, and I've spent some time over the last few months going through each of these volumes, trying to pick out what I felt were what struck me as the most interesting of his insights. And the way I defined interesting primarily was that these insights are maybe a little bit off the beaten path. Additionally, there are 3 distinct commentaries on Megillas Esther from Rabbi Moshe Dovid Valle, who was a close friend of the Ramchal, and all of his Megillah interpretations also kind of weave some pshat with some Kabbalah. And again, I've spent some time going through them, trying to pick out what appeared to be, to me, rather to be the best of his explanations. Now, last year, we managed to get through the first chapter of Megillas Esther. This year, because there's a bit more time, I'm hoping to get through chapters 2 and 3, and I'll probably be making each one of these videos a little bit shorter than the ones I did last year. So let's begin. The second chapter, second Perek of Megillas Esther begins, Achar hadevarim ha'ela, after these matters, which of course was talking about the downfall of Vashti, Kishoch Chamas HaMelech Achashverosh, as the anger of King Achashverosh calmed down, Zachar es Vashti, he remembered Vashti, ve'es asher asasa, and that which she did, v'asher nigzar aleha, and he also remembered what had been decreed upon her. So the Ateres Zahav says, based on a Medrash Rabbah in Bereshis, that whenever a pasuk or a subject begins with the phrase Achar hadevarim ha'ela, after these things, as a lead-in to the new discussion, it's always an indication that whoever we're talking about over here who's about to act has been sitting and contemplating something that's been going on for a while. And therefore, the pasuk is indicating to us that Achashverosh was sitting there on his throne and kind of thinking about, puzzled by his own behavior vis-a-vis Vashti, and trying to figure out what it was that had led him to killing Vashti. After all, he had this beautiful queen, and how did he get to the point where he wanted her to come in front of him naked? How did he want to humiliate his beloved wife to that extent? Also, he realized that the decree on Vashti to kill her had not exactly been when he was in a state of anger. Because, yes, she refused to come and Achashverosh got angry. But he didn't kill her immediately. Instead, what happened was he took his time to consult with his advisors. He had had plenty of time to calm down and relax before he had made the decision to kill her. It's almost as if he had just taken the decision and given it up to his advisors and then somehow didn't have the self-control or the internal fortitude to stop them from killing her. That's why he wants to say, that's why it says kishoch, which we translated as when he calmed down. But Ateres Zahav wants to suggest that it was like he calmed down, because the truth is he didn't really have to calm down all that much, because he had been calm before the decision to kill Vashti had been made. He also points out that it refers to her here as Vashti. We discussed last year that sometimes Vashti is referred to as the queen. Sometimes Vashti is referred to as just plain Vashti, not the Queen Vashti. And he was regretting over here that he treated her as just Vashti, as if she was just any old person who he could just get away with killing her on a whim. And also the fact that he treated her in such a demeaning manner, as if she was just not a queen, that it was his right to humiliate her in front of all the officers. Furthermore, we know we have a rule that whenever it says the word es, it's always coming to include something else. So if it says es Vashti, so he wants to explain that it was coming to include himself. And he was realizing that he hadn't just humiliated Vashti. Even more so with his behavior, he had humiliated himself. He was a fool of a king, he realized, in his demands of Vashti, and then in the way in which he treated her when she refused to accede to his demands. In his Kabbalistic approach, he wants to explain that the Melech that we're referring to over here is referring to the Melech Zokain Vixil, the old foolish king, meaning the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination. And he was now thinking about Vashti, about the primordial snake. There's the evil inclination, and the primordial snake is the one who carries out the wishes and instructions of the evil inclination. And our sages teach us that the wicked are full of regrets. So he was remembering now Vashti, the forces of evil that act in the world, Ve'esa Shera Sasa, everything that Vashti had done since the beginning of time to wreak havoc within the world. And also about that which had been decreed on Vashti, meaning the fact that we're told that in future times all of the forces of evil are going to be obliterated. Bila hamavis lenetzach, death will come to an end. The forces of impurity Hashem is going to remove from the world, it says in Zechariah. So the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, was wondering to himself, like, why exactly am I doing all of this? Why am I causing all of this evil? Why am I inciting and enticing people to do evil? What am I going to end up getting out of all of this in the long run? And finally, we'll take a look at the explanation of Rav Moshe Dovid Valle. He wants to explain that what does it mean, achar hadavara me'ela, after these things? It means after Hashem's plan has already started to be implemented. Because Hashem's plan was he had to get rid of Vashti in order to put Esther in her place. And just like in the previous Perek, Hashem had succeeded in putting that into the heart of Achashverosh to show Vashti the door. Now it was time to welcome Esther in as the next stage of Hashem's plot. And as we mentioned from the Ateres Zahav, that it would seem that Achashverosh had kind of given up the right to decide what to do with Vashti. And he handed it over to his advisors. And of course, Memuchan, who Chazal tell us is Haman, jumped to the forefront and decreed Vashti's death upon her. So Rav Moshe Dovid Valle asks, why didn't Achashverosh now retaliate on Haman by killing him for having given him this advice? But he explains that the Pasuk says in Mishlei, Leiv Melech biyad Hashem, that the heart of a king is in the hands of God. Vel kol asher chafetz yatenu, and Hashem will turn the heart of a king wherever Hashem's wants. And therefore, not only didn't Achashverosh kill Haman in retaliation, but on the contrary, as we'll see momentarily, Achashverosh turned around and raised Haman up to a more prominent position, where he had the opportunity to become even more evil. And this was, so to speak, a reward from Hashem to Haman because of Haman's role in getting rid of the wicked Vashti. But at the same time, as of course we know from the story, it also set the table for the ultimate and eventual destruction of Haman.